On this episode of This Week in Linux, we talk about the recent FCC decision to roll back net neutrality rules. We'll check out some new application releases for GIMP, firejail, and the mutt email client. There was some interesting distro news this week, including a new release for MX Linux and some design updates from Kubuntu and Q4OS. We'll also check out some Linux gaming news and even some core news like Red Hat's Thunderbolt 3 related project. All that and much more coming up. I'm Michael Tennell with TuxDigital, and this is your weekly source for Linux news. Up first in the show this week is table flipping news from the FCC repealing net neutrality rules. I could go into this long spiel about why this is bad for the internet or whatever, but I decided to wait because it turns out that the FCC doesn't care about what the citizens of the country think. And they proved that by ignoring 20 million comments about not doing with this. And I didn't make a video because I knew what they were going to vote for, and I wanted to wait to see what happens after the fact. So I will be making a video on this topic in the coming couple days or so, where I go in more in depth about what was happened, why it was a mistake, what can be done now, or what is going to be done now, things like that. And I'll also address like the arguments on both sides, so it's not like just one opinionated video or anything. It's going to be like all-encompassing video. But I decided to wait because the votes that the FCC commissioners made, the ones who voted for the repeal to get rid of the rules, they announced they were going to do this 2 years ago. So it's not surprising. But anyway, unfortunately, this is some pretty bad news that affects pretty much everyone who uses the internet. So there you go. Now to some actually good news. This week, GIMP released 2.9.8, and with it comes a lot of cool and exciting features. The version release actually seems like a small update, but actually it's quite a lot. So for example, the first thing we're going to talk about is the on-canvas gradient editing. Now, the on-canvas gradient editing is the ability to use the canvas to create the gradients themselves. So for example, you can see in the video that they can move around the gradient with the tool built into the canvas rather than like a pop-up dialog tool. And then you can add extra points and change the color like fairly quickly, adding midpoints and all this kind of stuff, so like you can have multi-level gradients and stuff like that. I actually like this a lot better than Photoshop's way of doing it, because the Photoshop way is just through like a pop-up dialog and it's like sliders and stuff. I like this approach better because it gives you much more specific control of how everything is laid out and like the distances and stuff. So that's pretty cool. The next thing they did was clip warning, which allows you to visualize underexposed and overexposed area. So like this is an overexposed area at the top, and then you have other sections down here that are underexposed. So it kind of gives you like a filtering mask to show you like where those areas are implied of overexposure and underexposure. So that's pretty cool. They've also added better PSD support, which is Photoshop documents, and paste in place function. The paste in place function is actually pretty cool because what it does, it allows you to copy something in one like composition and then paste it into another composition while it stays in the same location of where you copied it previously. So if your canvas is the same size and then you want to like move one to the other, you can just copy it and stay in the same place rather than having to like paste it in and then move it back to where it was. That is fantastic. So good job, GIMP. And I can't wait for GIMP 3.0 because that's going to be a lot of cool stuff. firejail 0.9.52 was released this week. firejail is if you've never heard of this, it's a really cool sandboxing tool that you can run applications as you say firejail, then the name of the application, and allows you to run inside of a sandboxed environment. 0.9.52 was released, and it includes systemd resolved integration, netfilter template support, and adds a timeout feature so that you can automatically time out sandboxes. And then you can also have like a whitelisting for various directories, more specifically the var directory. So you can use the var directory inside of the sandbox. Well, the var directory that is outside of the sandbox, you can use stuff for putting like logs and stuff into that from the sandbox. Another cool thing about this is that firejail is pretty much the main way that you can have sandboxing with an app image. So if you use app images and you want to do like a sandboxing environment for them, firejail is the way to go. KDE announced KDE Applications 17.12 this week. With this release comes a lot of updates to pretty much the entire stack, including Dolphin has now capable of saving searches, limiting the search to only specific folders, or actually only 2 folders, so that when you search, you're not going to display files, just folders. You can now make it easier to rename files as well by double-clicking the file name extension instead of having to like use F2 or right-click or anything like that. So that's nice. Ocular has added support for HiDPI, and also you can now share documents via email. GWinView has introduced new features for smoothing, smoother zooming, and improved keyboard navigation. The next notable thing is Kmail has added Microsoft Exchange support. So KDE Applications 17.12. Kdenlive 17.12 was also released this week, and this was a maintenance update focusing on bug fixes and stability. The coolest thing about this is that one of the things that kind of annoys me about Kdenlive is when you use it, when you're trying to seek on the timeline, it sometimes does a little stuttering thing, and that's one of the things they fixed, was making the seeking on the timeline much smoother. So that is fantastic. And they've also reduced the memory usage for Kdenlive as well, so that's great. So Kdenlive 17.12 is basically just a maintenance update, but it's like getting closer and closer to the next full update of 1804, which is like a big rewrite and everything. So like I'm super excited for this. Kdenlive is by far the best video editor that I've used on Linux. So every time it gets an update, I'm always super excited to try it out. If you're excited to try it out, check out the links in the video description. You can use it in the app image version that allows you to like not have to worry about installing and various things. So KDE is actually running a donation drive. So if you're interested in participating and helping out the KDE project because you like Kdenlive, for example, then check out the donation drive linked to the video description. And KDE powers you, so you can power KDE. Mutt 1.9.2 was released this week, and with it comes the fix for a problem they were having with MIME encryption, and also enables full address matching during message scoring. Another thing they did is a lot of translation updates from previous version of 1.9.1, and quite a few more things, but most of it's just like bug fixing and maintenance and stuff like that. So it is a maintenance release, but I wanted to feature Mutt because it's a really cool, like, it's a terminal-based email client. So if you like using the terminal for a lot of applications and you want to try out a cool email client in the terminal, definitely check out Mutt. It is pretty cool. Mutt 1.9.2. This week, Mozilla made a mistake. It was a weird decision on their part. It's not like it's a big deal. It's not like it's a huge problem that they did it. But it is problematic because it just shows they make some weird decisions sometimes. I think this is more than likely a advertisement play. So they were probably given money for it in some way. So people are kind of like wondering what's Mozilla going to do for, advertising or like funding. And I think this might be part of that. I don't know for sure about that part because they haven't really explained it. But there was an add-on that a lot of Firefox people have. If you are a Firefox user and you have the Shield Studies system activated, you may actually have this installed into your Firefox browser right now. It is an add-on that Mozilla forcibly installed into your system without informing you. It's like a scavenger hunt game thing for Mr. Robot's next season coming out. And Mr. Robot's a show about how like privacy and security is really important and stuff like that. And Firefox is a browser that's in a project overall that is very privacy oriented and security oriented. And then they team up together to forcibly install an add-on in your system. Like, what? Why? Like, what good does this do? Not everybody who uses Firefox watches Mr. Robot. Not everybody who watches Mr. Robot uses Firefox. I doubt very many people would want an add-on automatically installed in their browser for no reason, just for an ad. Essentially, it's an ad. So next time you want to do that, just prompt them if they want to try, like, play the game or something. Hey, little message that says, "Do you watch Mr. Robot? Try out blah blah blah." Like, whatever. It's just don't do this. It's not like it's not malicious. It's not malware or anything. It was created by Mozilla, so it is safe to use. It's just a bad idea. This week, MX Linux 17 was released. MX Linux is based on Debian 9.3 with the Linux kernel 4.13 and is supported both on 64-bit and 32-bit systems. What's come new with this release is a lot of updates to various different packages and stuff like that. But what makes MX really interesting is all their custom tools that they have. So, for example, they have like a simple editing option for conky files with their MX conky tool. And then they have the MX snapshot tool, making tweaks with the MX tweak tool. And what's really cool is the MX package installer tool, what allows you, like by default, you have Debian 9.3, which is Debian stable. So Debian stable is like all the packages that are not often updated. But if you want to use packages from, say, Debian testing or Debian SID, you can use the package installer tool from MX that allows you to use like different repos without having to worry about like the compatibility of sorts, because it'll handle that stuff for you. So MX Linux 17, check it out. Kubuntu announced this week that they're going to test a switch, but for the default Plasma theme to be Breeze Dark with the next release of 1804. You can already try this out in the daily ISOs if you'd like to. There's a little bit of confusion as to what is going on with this switch. So you can see there's some like articles being written about it, and there's some other podcasts are talking about it, and it's not exactly like what people are thinking it is. So a lot of people are looking at it as everything is changing to Breeze Dark, and that's not really the case. The windows of the applications themselves are not going to be changed. They're still going to be the Breeze Light theme. The panels, the menu, and the widgets would be changed to the dark variant. So it's more of a hybrid approach. You can see here that the panel down here at the bottom and the menu is dark, but then the window itself is light. So it's not really switching exclusively to the dark theme entirely. It's just the Plasma side of it. The reason why this is confusing to a lot of people is because the Plasma, saying that the Plasma theme has changed, people are kind of associating that means all of it. But in the terms of KDE's approach, Plasma is just the desktop environment, not the overall thing. So KWin's theme is what Breeze Light is being utilized as. The suggestion that they change for the testing was from me. My suggestion was because I wanted to make it an easier introduction to people when they start using the Kubuntu layout. Because it always bothered me that the default was so bright. Not because it bothered me. I wasn't going to use it anyway. I'm going to change it regardless. I'm going to change the windows too. But the default is, if it was dark, it's a lot more pleasant to the eye because it's not as jarring and so bright. Now, it's not good to read something, and it's better to read something with a light background and black text, for example, because that allows you to it's better for your eyes to read it, something like that. So reading like some documents or a website, it's good to actually be a light theme. but when it's like constantly there and not really supposed to be part of your like constant attention, it's your peripheral vision. It's better for it to be dark so it's not like always jarring. So that was the motivation behind the suggestion. And I think that's a better approach. But it's a good idea in my opinion, because when people are moving from Windows to Linux and they look at Kubuntu, for example, they go from Windows 10 to Kubuntu, and while it's not exactly the same or anything, it does have a familiar feel with the Windows 10 dark panel or dark taskbar with the Kubuntu Breeze Dark, if they were to do that. So I think that also gives it an appeal as well. So people kind of expect it maybe, but also the reasons for why it's good for the eyes. This week we got an announcement from Feren OS. They've reached 100,000 total downloads since they started the project in 2015. Feren OS is a fairly small group of people making a boutique distro based on Linux Mint. If you haven't heard of Feren OS, you're interested in seeing like what's the difference between Feren OS and Linux Mint, there's quite a few things. A really cool thing they did is the themer tool, which is like it's a layout manager tool that allows you to like modify things and then save it so that you can use it later, and like even like share the stuff so that you can set up your layout in a much easier way. So that is a really convenient thing to do for Mint, because Cinnamon doesn't by default have any ability to do that. So if you do change this stuff and then you have to reinstall, you won't be able to have any of that stored. So the Feren OS themer tool provides that option. If you're a Linux Mint user and you're interested to check out like a derivative of it, check out Feren OS. Link in the video description. Next up in the show is Q4OS Linux. They got a new experimental theme for their interface. Q4OS is a Debian-based distro that uses the Trinity DE, which is forked from KDE 3, so fairly old. And this update is about their Debonaire desktop theme. The interesting thing about this is, one, Trinity DE definitely needed an update to the look, because it looked like an XP, Windows XP wannabe kind of thing, which was done on purpose back in the day, but they still continue to use it now. But this new version actually kind of reminds me of the Breeze theme that Plasma 5 has. So like the window decorations for this theme for the window decorations look very much like Plasma 5. And that's fine because it's open source and everything. That's one of the benefits of open source. So I just thought it was interesting that the update for Trinity is to kind of look like Plasma 5. So anyway, Q4OS, if you're using that or interested in using that, you can check out the show notes in the video description. KDE posted a blog post this week for the Randa meetings that happened in September. So it's more like a roundup of what happened in all of the meetings, so that you can like check out all the different details about what happened in each meeting. But the Randa meetings are KDE's like annual get-together like development sprint, where they focus on various different topics and then all work together to achieve that. In this particular example, they did accessibility was like the main focus of the meeting this year. And one of the things I wanted to talk about in the show was this really cool Kwin plugin that was made. It allows a developer to change the way the display of the screen is for colorblind people. It allows you to change how the screen is displaying the colors, so that you can like manipulate your application based on how someone who's colorblind might view your application, so that you can like and you got various different like whether you have like black and white type of colorblind or you have a red and green colorblind stuff. So it's really cool, so that you can just because if you don't have the ability, it's hard to tell. So the Kwin plugin allows you to like apply this type of filter on top of your existing application, so that you can see what they kind of. It's really cool to see that they're putting an effort into like making it easier for people to adjust their applications based on the accessibility aspect of colorblindness. So that's really cool. And keep up the good work, KDE. So, if you watched last week's episode, you might notice that there wasn't any kind of reference to Patreon at all in the show. And that's because they decided to institute this new fee system that I was not really on board with, that I might, I considered even switching away from Patreon because of this fee system. Thankfully, we can put the table back down and not have to worry about that particular issue, because Patreon this week announced that they are not going through with the policy change of the fee system. So if you're curious what it was, essentially it was, instead of at the moment prior to the announcement, you had the creators were paying a processing fee for all of the money that was being processed. Whereas this new announcement was taking that fee from the creator side and forcing it onto the patron side. And the community, the Patreon community on both patrons and creator sides did not like that idea and actually very adamantly hated it. So the community just basically came out against it and entirely. And Patreon, what's really cool about it is that Patreon made a mistake and they admitted that mistake and then fixed it. So that's really good. They should have, contacted the creators in the first place, but at least they didn't fully commit to it. They didn't double down on their bad decision. They did actually improve, so that's good. So we're still using Patreon for the TuxDigital channel. If you want to go to patreon.com/TuxDigital, back to normal, and they're not going to do this weirdness. So that's fantastic. But anyway, so if you're curious why this isn't a Linux show, it's because we use Patreon, and also because a lot of open source projects and various different things you might be interested in that are Linux related also use Patreon. So patreon.com/TuxDigital. A Steam client update was released this week, and with it comes some pretty interesting things for example, the shader pre-caching for OpenGL and Vulkan. If you've ever noticed that you might have some stuttering, some lag, or maybe the game takes a little while to load, it's because that shader cache has to be built every time. So that's pretty much what's happening. Where this new system, where you can have this new pre-caching system, is so that a game can actually offer the pre-made cache once you play the game, and you can save the cache, and then the next time you load it, it's a lot faster and a lot, and it also is a lot smoother too. So that's very cool. Another thing they did was where in some distributions of Linux, when you created a shortcut like a desktop or an application menu shortcut, it didn't always work that well. This update also supposedly fix that. So if you see any if you've ever experienced that kind of problem, this should be solved now. And they've also added a detection and a workaround for some games that have broken Steamworks SDK libraries. So overall, this is a much needed update. Linux gaming is always improving. That just shows you, always improving. So the Ataribox was supposed to start their crowdfunding type situation this week. That was not done, and instead there was an announcement that the pre-order launch has been paused. The Ataribox itself has not been paused, but their pre-order, they're saying that they need more time to make sure that the time frame that they announced, how long it's going to be between the launch, the pre-orders, and the actual shipments. They need more time to make sure everything is optimum and stuff like that. So it's really weird that they would have the announcement when it's going to be pre-ordered and then the pausing so close to each other. That's pretty weird. But hopefully the Ataribox does come to fruition and isn't phantomware. I hope it does happen, because the specs that we do have, even though it's not a lot of specs, it does look and sound interesting. So I hope it does happen, and it's not I hope it's not just a retro console game thing, and it's a full console, because that would be way better. And the fact that they were basing it on Steam Machine specs and Steam OS implies that it will be a full gaming console. So Hopefully it is. Hopefully it comes out soon. Hopefully you can pre-order soon. This week, the Frosty Fest event for Rocket League has started. If you're not aware of my opinion of this game, it's pretty high. So it's on the show more than it probably should be. People might be annoyed by it, but I really like this game. But the reason it's on the show is not for me to promote it or anything, because it's actually because there's a bug, a pretty big bug for Linux gamers that has not been fixed yet, unfortunately. It started as early this week, and it's still pretty much every time I play the game, I still get the issue. The new crate has some items that are not compatible with the Linux platform. So every once in a while, you'll just crash for no reason. So you'll join a game and just crash, or you'll try to join a party and it'll just crash, or you try to open a crate and it just crashes. So the problem is that these items are not compatible. So here's what happens: if you open the crate and it loads the item, it crashes you. If you join a party with someone who has the item, it crashes you. If you join a game where someone has the item in the game that you're joining, it crashes you. So, in order to alleviate it, there is a little bit of a workaround. You can disable the cross-network play, that it disables like Xbox and PS4, so you can play just PC, and that lowers the amount of people who might have these items, so it lowers the amount of crashing, so that's good. That's basically all you can do. As soon as you play with someone who has those items, there's really nothing you can do about it. Hopefully, by getting more people and more attention to the game, this problem, the Psionics will fix it sooner than later, right? So that's the goal. We'll see. This week, System 76 announced their HiDPI Daemon. This is a daemon that you can install for their laptops and desktops, and it improves the ability to use HiDPI displays as well as multi-monitor configurations. So it improves both multiple HiDPI as well as having like a HiDPI mixed with a low DPI monitor, and in various different resolutions and stuff like that. So very nice to see. The only thing that's kind of weird about it, and it's not really weird, it's just kind of unfortunate, in the sense that this daemon seems to only have support for Intel and NVIDIA. Like, it might work with AMD as well, but they don't ship AMD hardware in their stuff. They only do Intel and NVIDIA, so that makes sense. That's why they only were shipping this daemon for those. It'd be nice to see it in the future if they also include AMD. But anyway, System 76 HiDPI Daemon, pretty cool. If you use System 76 hardware or Pop! OS, definitely check it out. Bolt is a new project from the Red Hat team that's for Thunderbolt 3 security on Linux. Thunderbolt 3 has security levels, has 4 security levels, and one of the issues is that this Thunderbolt 3 is super fast, but it opens up like plug-and-play stuff for like direct memory access attacks or DMA attacks. So it makes it like a lot easier to like plug something in and attack the machine because of the protocol that it uses. So there's 4 security levels that needs to be integrated into a system in order to use it. The Linux 4.13 kernel actually introduced the kernel side support for these levels, but we didn't really have a user space level protection in that case, except for now we do with the Bolt project, thanks to Red Hat. So that's fantastic. And if you have a Thunderbolt 3 support, you might not actually know it because it uses USB Type-C, where you can actually get USB Type-C cables that are both Thunderbolt and USB or just USB. So it's really hard to sometimes tell what you have and what you don't have. At least we're going to have security when you do have those cables. Now we just got to get devices and things like that support Thunderbolt 3, which is not really common. It's coming, and that's good. It's also, Thunderbolt 3 is also open source. That's why there's such a huge implementation of it. Anyway, Bolt. AMD announced that they're open sourcing the Vulkan driver in the AMD GPU Pro graphics stack. The AMD's Vulkan Linux driver was initially going to be closed source and then would then be open sourced once it was ready. This was an announcement they made basically like 2 years ago. It hasn't happened yet. So that was kind of weird that it took them that long. But it's great that it finally has happened. Okay. Technically, it hasn't really happened. They announced that it's going to happen, and they will be releasing it shortly. They say within a few days or so. Seemingly before Christmas, they're going to release the source code for the Vulkan driver of AMD GPU Pro. What exactly is this? It's it's the official Vulkan driver that is already you're already using it inside of AMD GPU. This is just taking the source code from that driver and releasing that because they think it's at a point now where it's ready to be released. So that's great, and it's going to be released under the GPU Open umbrella project. Fantastic news for AMD. Hopefully, fantastic, and keep them coming. Systemd 236 version was released this week, and on this version you get we got updates for Lux 2 encrypted partition support, and another they got boot CTL has a new listing feature, so you can list all the boot menu options, and has some various improvements overall and for the Systemd Network D networking improvements. It also introduced a really cool feature that I like, where you can choose the initial keyboard mapping with Systemd-first boot, as well as System Control has a new feature called dry-run, where you can make changes based on any given command and then run that to see what's going to happen without actually running the command for it to actually perform the action. So you can see what would have happened instead of doing it. So that's a nice feature. So anyway, Systemd 236. Thanks for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. If you like what I do here on the show, please hit that like button, and if you'd like to get more, be sure to subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, we have a Patreon at patreon.com/TuxDigital, or you can order the Linux is Everywhere t-shirt by going to tuxdigital.com/LinuxIsEverywhere. Just a reminder, the show is live every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern, so join us in the live chat room to discuss all the latest Linux news each week. And before I finish the show, I wanted to first apologize for it being late and explain why it was late. So, as I said just now that we have a live stream every Saturday, I learned something this week. An impromptu live stream that lasts 9 hours is not a very good way to be productive for editing your video for your show. So, next week, instead of 9-hour stream, I'm going to make it a little shorter and just worry about the show content instead of a very long marathon stream. So yeah, sorry about that. The people who were there for the stream, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did and you would like to have me do another marathon stream, if I schedule it, I can probably do it better and for the editing and the timing and everything. But an impromptu stream that long was not a good idea. I learned that the hard way. So next week we'll do it in a little bit shorter. And if you do want to do a marathon stream sometime in the future, just let me know, and we'll try to schedule that in. So anyway, sorry for being late again. Thanks again for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. I'm Michael Tunnell with Tux Digital, and as always, keep using, learning, and enjoying Linux.